Julian Assange is now, as you heard, if you were watching us when we were talking to Joseph Cotry-Monson, he's facing a further wait over extradition ruling. The issues is that the High Court has ruled that the US must give assurances that Julian Assange will not face the death penalty. I find it interesting that in 2021, the UK High Court ruled that he should be extradited. Priti Patel, of course, backed that up. She was the then Home Secretary. That was in 2022, but they said he should be extradited, and they dismissed claims that his poor mental health might take his life in a US jail. It's hard to wrap your head around the fact that this has been going on since 2011, that it wouldn't have an effect on his mental health. Stella Assange is not only the wife of Julian Assange, she's a brilliant lawyer, as you heard Joseph Cotry-Monson say earlier, and in an exclusive, we're joined by her now. Stella, thank you so much for your time. I mentioned there that mental health is often dismissed, and in Julian's case, this has been going on for so long. Can I ask you how his mental health is?
Well, it's extremely challenging, and he's suffering immensely. The judge's decision back in 2021 to not extradite him, which was later overturned, that was January 2021, and at that point, she found that his mental state was in such a bad place that he should not be extradited. And then, of course, we know what happened. The U.S. appealed and so on. So he's been in a high security prison for almost 5 years. In fact, it's this week that it will be 5 years, and he's not serving a sentence. He hasn't been convicted in this country. And the case that the US is bringing against him is completely absurd. So just having to deal with the absurdity of the case, and he's facing 175 years in extremely harsh conditions if he's extradited, and already harsh conditions here. It's indefinite, it's cruel, and he's fighting every day is really a fight.
And you mentioned he's in a high security prison. Have you visited him there? What is it like? What, if you can describe the conditions under which he's been held, as you say, without a charge for the last 5 years?
Well, it's a high security prison, maximum security prison. As far as UK prisons go, that's where they put the most dangerous criminals when they're facing trial, and then later on they're sent on to other prisons once they're convicted. Julian is in fact the prisoner who has spent the longest in Belmarsh on his wing, and the security checks to go in are extremely stringent. I mean, everyone has to go through it, including our two children who are 5 and 6 years old. They are, they get checked, they get patted down. They check inside your mouth and inside your hair, under your feet. And there's a dog search, and the children also have to go through this.
What do you tell your children? I mean, when they go to see Daddy, how do you explain that? Because I know we're talking about the political, but we often forget about the human. That we're talking not about Julian Assange, just a cause, but a human being, a daddy, a husband. What do you say to your children?
Well, I tell them that Julian should never have gone to prison in the first place, that he's in prison wrongfully. That he never did anything bad, that he's there because bad people put him there, because he made them very angry for exposing the bad things they did. So it's they're 5 and 6, so you really have to go down to some basics, but it's a good exercise, actually, because often when Julian's case is talked about, it's talked about as if it's quite complex and, you have to know all the backstory, but actually you don't have to. He published information that embarrassed very powerful forces, and those powerful forces then put him in prison. And it's in every sense the classic, revenge on a journalist who exposed a powerful interest. And this is something that it's a pattern that we know well, and it's happening right now.
Now, again, as I said, you're not only a wife and a mother, but you're also a very highly respected lawyer. How do you juggle all those roles in your personal relationship with Julian?
Well, I mean, Julian has a very significant team of lawyers now. For many years, I was working on his team, and I still do in some respects. But now my main role, as far as advocacy goes, is public advocacy, and basically breaking down and translating the case into why it matters to the general public, why it matters to free Julian as a human being, and the implications it has for everyone. Because by putting Julian in prison, it's really the public's right to know the truth about those powerful forces, governments, and so on. When they do wrongdoing, they have to be able to be exposed without that act being punished.
Absolutely, absolutely. And Stella, again, I come back to, but how, as a human being, I'm just trying to think, and it's a totally different situation. Me with my husband, I often have to juggle even being a journalist with being a wife. And I'm just interested how you do that.
Well, I see Julian once or twice a week, and those visits are incredibly important. They're in a meeting room full of people. Every other prisoner who has a visit that day, about 40 of them, is in the same hall meeting with their families. We're all each sitting at our tables. Julian's not allowed to stand up, only when he comes in. And I can hug him, and I can hold his hand across the table. We can share a coffee, and that kind of thing. And that's an hour and a half that we have together. And then we also speak over the phone during the day, throughout the day. We can't speak 24 hours because there are restrictions, and it's only 10 minutes at a time. So that's also very frustrating. But you kind of, I don't want to say you adapt, but you kind of do. Without these things, it would be impossible, emotionally impossible for both him and me to bear the situation. So it's really essential for us to be able to have this kind of constant contact. He knows what I'm doing every day, where I'm going, what I'm up to. He speaks to the kids every day. They tell him what's happened at school and so on. So that's how we're living our marriage and our relationship at the moment, with our focus on Julian coming home when this nightmare is brought to an end.
And the nightmare surely would, obviously would be tenfold if he does get extradited to the USA. Is there a genuine fear that he could face the death penalty? I mean, the US is saying no. Is that not enough?
Well, look, they could have given an assurance that they weren't going to bring the death penalty, and they didn't. And in fact, that's a very common assurance to give. And when it comes to the United States, I've learned that this is a country that has elements within it that have been involved in very serious criminality, including planning to kidnap and even kill Julian while he was inside the Ecuadorian embassy. And of course, that was when the CIA was led by Mike Pompeo. That was under the Trump administration. But of course, if that's what's already happened, who's to say what might happen? It's not just about the Biden administration right now. It's about what may come, and how these elements within the United States who hate Julian and want to see him dead and send a signal by doing so, whether they can take hold of control over his conditions in a prison or and so on.
Well, I was going to say, Stella, as well, Trump has said very openly that Julian should be disappeared, should be dead. I mean, he came out and said that. If he comes back into power, it makes it, triply scary.
Well, that's exactly right. When WikiLeaks published these documents from Chelsea Manning, Trump was on record saying, well, there should be a death penalty or something in relation to this publication. And it was under the Trump administration that this indictment was brought. And of course, there's a high probability that there will be a new Trump administration. And all the people around Mr. Trump who may, maybe wanting to see Julian dead again. So Julian, of course, should never be facing this prospect. He should just be able to be free. He hasn't done anything. He hasn't hurt anyone. He just practiced journalism. He published evidence of others committing criminality, and there's been a kind of a hostile takeover of the legal process in order to further the political goals of these forces that have been exposed.
What do you mean by that when you say a hostile takeover over the legal process?
Well, it's a political case, so it has never been. Julian is accused under the Espionage Act. So this is a piece of legislation that was brought in during the First World War, and never before has it been used against a publisher. It's never been used or interpreted in this bizarre way that basically relabels journalism as espionage. There's no allegation that Julian was acting on behalf of another power or anything like that. The indictment itself says that he received it from the material from Chelsea Manning, and he published it for the public, not for anyone else's benefit. And there's no question about how important this material was. It revealed war crimes and torture and so on. When the law is used in an previously in an unprecedented manner, in a way that has previously never been done before, in such a heavy-handed manner, and he's facing 18 charges, 175 years in prison, then that's a obvious indication that what you're seeing here is a weaponization of the law to suit certain political goals, which is basically to silence Julian, but to also silence journalists and to keep the public ignorant.
Let me ask you a question. In your best case scenario, if Julian was released, do you think he'd ever be truly safe? You've mentioned before, the CIA under Mike Pompeo and what have you. There will be, I'm guessing, many Americans who would see Julian as a traitor, et cetera, et cetera. Do you think he'd ever be truly safe if when he is free?
Well, I don't know that Julian will ever be truly safe, but there is a political persecution that has to stop. There are protections that should be kicking in. Julian exercised his right to publish, to freedom of expression. These are protected rights within this jurisdiction, and he should be protected from a state taking legal measures to silence him and imprison him. There should also be protections from, extrajudicial means of assassination and so on. But there would be a very strong signal if the court said, actually, enough is enough. This man should not be suffering anymore. He's been in prison for 5 years. This case against him is unprecedented and, strange and politically charged, and let him just be free. That would be protective.
I mean, that's probably never going to happen. In the event of that not happening, I mean, courts aren't in the, it would be very unusual for a court to be able to admit that, for a state, if you like, to admit that. It would be America admitting that. Surely he would always be looking over his shoulder, if and when he's free. I mean, it's a scary scenario. Being here in the States, you see some of the, what can I call them? So, some of the rhetoric, if I can talk about the far right as well, it would be scary, surely.
Well, the scariest prospect is the one that we have right now, where he is indefinitely imprisoned, where his health is deteriorating, where he is risking imminent extradition, really, because he's just one step away from extradition. And this just has to stop. If he's free, we can take measures to protect him, of course. But right now he's in a very precarious situation where his health is in decline, and that in itself is perhaps the greatest risk.
When you say his health is in decline, are we talking about physical and mental health?
Yes, I'm talking about both. But he's 52 now. I mean, he's been in a prison cell for 5 years. He isn't getting the type of exercise or nutrition that he needs. When you keep a person in those conditions, of course, they will deteriorate. And I'm extremely worried about him. And he's already had health episodes. He had a minor stroke in October 2022. He's on medication, and he just should not be suffering like this. He's, you know, his body can only take so much.
You know, we're talking about his body, but I come back to kind of where we started off. How he deals. I mean, this is day after day after day. You know, how I'm trying to put my head inside his. How does he deal with it? I mean, you know, for all the words in the world, when you're sitting there and your fate, your life, I mean, we have one life to live. Your life is in the hands of people outside. You can talk to your children and your wife on the phone, but then you must get to a certain kind of, I call it skin hunger. You know, I mean, any dad doesn't think twice about being able to cuddle his wife or his children. How the hell do you deal with that? How does he deal with that day after day after day?
Well, it's difficult to answer that question because it changes from day to day. Some days are extremely difficult, and it's hard to know what to say to get him, you know, to see, to feel optimistic about the possibilities of the future. And then other days he brightens up. So it really changes from day to day. And there have been weeks that have been very dark, periods where he's been, you know, unrecognizable and sleep deprived and really, really deeply in a dark place. But he's also struggling.
What do you say to him when he's like that? I mean, you're probably his biggest cheerleader, but what do you say to him when he's in those dark days?
Well, I try to keep him connected to the day to day. I try to keep him connected to the reality outside, because if it becomes too much about those prison walls, then it's easy to get lost. So even mundane things are important to connect him to. And I describe what I see if I'm walking in a park when he calls. You know, I describe small things to make him imagine what it's like outside the prison.
Yeah, it must be really, really tough on him, on you, and on your children, which is why I'm doubly, trebly grateful for you speaking with us today and just reminding people of the humanity behind all of this. You know, we see the headlines and forget there's an actual human being, a dad with a family and with a wife. So I do thank you for taking the time to speak with us today. Stella Assange there, talking about her husband, Julian Assange, and it will be in May that we find out about the US extradition, whether it's been successful or not. And as you heard Joseph Kotry-Monson saying before, it's yet another step in a very long, sad and sorry